The sun was just beginning to dip toward the horizon, casting a warm golden hue over the ocean as waves gently lapped at the shore. It was the kind of evening that made luxury resorts feel like a slice of paradise. Peaceful, picture-perfect, and carefully curated for the wealthy and well-dressed. At the entrance of the exclusive Seabreeze Resort, with its marble fountains and uniformed staff, a woman stood quietly. She wore a simple sundress and flat sandals, her hair pulled back in a loose braid. No designer purse, no obvious jewelry, just a small canvas bag on her shoulder and a calm, content expression. Her name was Lila. She had come to the resort on a whim, hoping to surprise her husband, who was supposed to arrive later that day. She knew he loved the ocean view here. It was the same resort they had once visited years ago, before life got so busy, before success turned quiet dinners into boardroom meetings and long walks into rushed calls. Lila wasn't flashy, and she didn't like attention. She loved simplicity, early morning coffee, soft breezes, good books. And her husband, Marcus, a billionaire in the tech world, loved her for exactly that. But as she stepped through the grand glass doors of the resort, something shifted. The lobby was buzzing with the gentle hum of quiet conversations, luggage wheels on tile floors, and the clinking of glasses from the poolside bar. Lila approached the front desk with a warm smile. "Hi, I'm here to check in. The reservation should be under Marcus Layton." The young woman at the front desk glanced up, then quickly looked Lila over. Her smile tightened. "Do you have an ID?" "Of course," Lila said, reaching into her bag and pulling it out. The receptionist took the card, typed something into her computer, then paused. "I see the reservation. However, this is a private suite. We usually require the main guest to be present before allowing anyone access." Lila blinked, slightly surprised. "He'll be here shortly. I just wanted to check in first. He made the reservation for both of us." "Unfortunately," the receptionist said with a cooler tone now, "we've had incidents before. If you'd like, you can wait in the lounge, but I'll need to ask you not to wander the premises." Lila's cheeks flushed. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I've stayed here before." Another woman, slightly older and clearly in a supervisory role, approached. She looked at the screen, then at Lila. "Ma'am, we try to maintain a certain standard here. If you don't have a booking in your name or proper clearance, we can't allow access. Perhaps you'd feel more comfortable at one of the public beach cafes nearby." Lila stared at them, the implications sinking in slowly. It wasn't about policy, it was about how she looked. Too simple, too plain, not polished enough to fit the image they wanted to uphold. Still calm, she replied, "I'd like to wait for my husband here." "I'm sorry," the supervisor said more firmly now. "You'll need to leave the property." Security wasn't aggressive, but they were quick. Lila was escorted back outside, her dignity intact but her heart heavy. She walked down the path leading to the beach, her sandals brushing against the gravel. She found a quiet bench near the edge of the property, where resort guests couldn't see her. She sat there watching the ocean, unsure whether to laugh or cry. 2 hours passed, the sky deepened into soft purple and gold. Music drifted faintly from the pool area. Guests sipped cocktails under tiki torches, unaware that something was about to happen, something that would ripple through the resort staff like a tidal wave. Out on the horizon, a silhouette began to form. At first, it looked like just another yacht in the distance. But as it moved closer, it became clearer this was no ordinary boat. It was massive, sleek, the kind of yacht that only appeared in luxury magazines and billionaire portfolios. Its deep navy hull gleamed under the setting sun, and a golden L was painted near the front, subtle but unmistakable. The name of the yacht, Leora, after Lila. Dock workers on the resort's private pier scrambled into position. Staff ran to alert management. Guests lined the edges of the beach to get a better look. It was a spectacle, something that didn't just happen every day. Then, from the upper deck, a man stepped into view. Tall, dressed in a relaxed white shirt and khaki trousers, barefoot, holding a phone in one hand. He said something to the captain, then descended toward the dock with practiced ease. It was Marcus Layton, and his expression was unreadable. He walked down the dock like he had done it 100 times before, But this time he wasn't here for meetings or media. He was here for his wife. Lila saw him from the bench where she sat, still in the same sundress, still unnoticed by most of the staff. But when Marcus spotted her, everything around him seemed to pause. He walked straight toward her. No hesitation, no confusion. "Did they really kick you out?" he asked, voice low but steady. Lila gave a small nod, unsure whether to feel embarrassed or amused. "Said I didn't look like I belonged." Marcus's jaw clenched, but he didn't raise his voice. "Stay right here." And with that, he turned. The next moments felt like something out of a movie. Marcus strode back to the resort entrance with security trying to catch up, management rushing to explain, to apologize, to offer champagne and late check-ins. But Marcus wasn't interested in noise. He was interested in making a point. Guests and staff alike watched as Marcus demanded the names of those involved, calmly but firmly. He didn't yell, he didn't threaten, but his presence alone did what no shouting could. He made it very clear who he was and what his values were. And then he did something that left everyone stunned. He turned to the crowd and said, "For a place that claims to serve the best, maybe start by learning how to treat people like human beings." Then he walked away, toward the woman who had been dismissed just for looking ordinary, toward the person who had been his partner long before the yachts, the business empires, or the magazine covers. He took her hand, and together they stepped onto the yacht. But what happened next? Let's just say, the story wasn't over, not even close. As the yacht pulled away from the resort dock, the murmurs and gasps from the crowd began to fade behind them. Lila stood beside Marcus, her hand still gently wrapped in his. The salty wind caught her hair and swept it across her cheek, but she didn't bother to fix it. Her thoughts were still circling around the way she had been treated, how quickly she had been judged, like her worth was measured by her clothes, her jewelry, her appearance. Not once had they looked at her like a person, just a possible inconvenience. Marcus didn't say much as the crew guided Leora farther out to sea, but his silence wasn't cold. It was the kind of quiet that held weight, the kind that told her he was thinking carefully, processing, choosing his words. She glanced at him, studying the side of his face as the fading sunlight highlighted the sharp lines of his jaw and the slight crease between his brows. "Why didn't you tell them who you were?" he asked finally, his voice softer now, laced with frustration, but not at her. Lila shrugged lightly. "I didn't think I had to. I thought maybe I could just be me." Marcus looked down for a moment, then turned his eyes to the open sea. "You shouldn't have had to explain anything. Not to them, not to anyone." The silence between them stretched again, but it was different now. Heavier, like something had cracked open that neither of them had noticed before. Not just the way the world saw her, but the way they had started to drift apart without meaning to. As the yacht settled into calmer waters, a few staff members began preparing dinner on the upper deck, setting the table with elegant simplicity. Lila's favorite: fresh seafood, warm bread, and a soft jazz melody floating from the built-in speakers. But Lila didn't have much of an appetite. "I keep thinking," she began slowly, "if I had worn heels, or if I'd carried one of those designer bags you bought me, would they have treated me differently?" "You shouldn't have to dress up just to be respected," Marcus said, his tone firm. "The world might judge people by appearances, but that's not how I built everything. It's not how we built us." That word, us, made her chest ache a little. Lila sat down at the edge of the deck, watching the moonlight dance on the waves. "Do you remember the first time we talked about building a life together? It was on that tiny fishing boat you rented during our second vacation. We had no money, no real plan, but we had each other. I never cared about the yachts or the resorts. I just wanted peace." Marcus sat beside her, elbows resting on his knees. "I know, and I've been chasing everything but that peace lately, trying to expand the company, make it bigger, faster, more powerful. But in doing that, I forgot how to slow down." Lila turned to look at him, searching his expression. There was no arrogance there, no pride, just quiet honesty. She had always admired that about him, his ability to own his flaws and face the truth without running. "You built an empire," she said gently. But I miss the man who used to spend hours just talking to me. The man who laughed over burnt toast and danced in the kitchen for no reason. Marcus gave a small, sad smile. He's still here, just buried under layers of noise. They sat there, the hum of the yacht surrounding them. In the distance, the lights of the resort were still visible, tiny and faint now, like a world far away from the one they were in. "Do you think they'll realize who I was?" Lila asked after a while. Marcus exhaled, leaning back on his hands. "Eventually, and they'll regret every second of how they treated you." "But will it change anything?" she asked. "Will they treat the next woman better?" He was quiet again, and that silence said everything. The truth was, probably not, because the world didn't change overnight, and people who looked down on others often didn't recognize the damage they caused until it was too late. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "Do you want me to make a statement? Call them out?" Lila shook her head. "No, that's not what this is about. I don't want revenge. I want awareness. I want people to see how easily we judge each other, how shallow it is. If you post something, make it about that. Not about me, not even about you. Make it about kindness." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You always were the wiser one." She smiled faintly. "Only on odd-numbered days." They shared a soft laugh, but under it, the tension was still there. Not just from the day's events, but from something deeper. This incident had exposed a wound in both of them, not just from the outside world, but between them. They had been drifting, not out of lack of love, but from life pulling them in opposite directions. Today had pulled them back into the same current. Suddenly, the sound of a smaller boat approaching caught their attention. Lila turned her head and saw a black speedboat heading their way. It wasn't part of the resort's fleet. It looked private, sleek, fast, and unmarked. Marcus stood up quickly, motioning to his crew. They moved fast, trained and alert. The yacht's security was discreet but well-trained, and within moments the lights on the deck dimmed just a little, enough to signal readiness without causing panic. Lila rose to her feet, her pulse quickening. "Do you know them?" "No," Marcus said, "but I don't like unexpected visitors this far out." As the boat drew closer, Lila could make out two figures aboard, both wearing dark clothes, one holding something that looked like a briefcase. It could have been business, or it could have been something else entirely. Marcus walked toward the edge of the deck where the yacht's side gate was located. He raised a hand calmly, signaling them to stop. "Identify yourselves," he called them, voice commanding and clear. No answer. The speedboat slowed but didn't stop completely. The man with the briefcase raised it slightly, as if to show it wasn't a weapon. But something felt off. Lila could sense it. The way the other man scanned the yacht. The tension in the air. "What's in the case?" Marcus asked, more firmly now. Still no response. The crew moved closer to Marcus, ready. Lila stayed back, her hands clenched, unsure whether to run for shelter or stay close. Her mind raced. Was this about business? A threat? A warning? And then the man finally spoke. Just two words. "It's time." Before anyone could respond, the speedboat cut its engine and began to drift slowly toward the yacht, eerie and silent under the moonlight. Lila's heart pounded. Marcus's expression darkened. Something was coming. And it wasn't just a boat. Marcus stepped forward slowly, his eyes fixed on the man holding the briefcase. The yacht's crew was tense, their hands hovering close to concealed radios or defensive gear. Lila felt a chill crawl up her spine, not from the ocean breeze, but from the strange stillness in the air. It was like the sea had paused, waiting. The man in the speedboat repeated his words again, this time louder. "It's time." Time for what? Marcus didn't respond right away. He was watching, calculating. He had spent years dealing with high-stakes business deals, powerful people, and ruthless competitors. But this felt different. This wasn't a scheduled meeting. This wasn't part of any plan. The other man on the boat finally reached for the engine, slowing the vessel to a stop just feet from the yacht. The briefcase-holding figure stepped onto the small boarding platform and stood there, not moving forward, not backing down. The look on his face was unreadable, somewhere between calm and ominous. Lila's pulse quickened. She took a few steps closer to Marcus, staying behind him but needing to feel near him. "Do you know him?" she whispered. Marcus gave a tiny shake of his head. Not yet. One of the yacht's security team approached Marcus quickly, leaning in to speak low. No ID match from our database, but the boat is rented out of Monaco. Unregistered transfer. Could be a message, or bait. Or both, Marcus muttered, then turned his gaze back toward the intruder. You've got 1 minute to explain yourself before I have you escorted off this vessel. The man finally opened the briefcase slowly, revealing nothing dangerous, no weapons, no documents, just a single key card and a photo. He lifted the photo and turned it toward them. It was of Lila, but not a current photo, one from years ago. A candid shot, taken before she had ever met Marcus, standing in front of a small bookstore she used to work at in Florence. The edges of the photo were worn, like it had been handled too many times. Lila's breath caught in her throat. Where did you get that? The man finally spoke again, his voice steady. You need to come with me. There are things you don't know, things that affect both of you. Marcus stepped forward sharply. You're not taking her anywhere. I'm not here to threaten her, the man replied calmly, but what I have will change everything. Tension twisted the air tighter. Lila couldn't take her eyes off the photograph. That picture had been taken on the same day an old friend had disappeared. One of the darkest memories of her past that she had tried to bury. A friend named Sophia, who had gone missing and was never found. She hadn't thought about that day in years. And now here it was, being brought back into her life by a stranger on the open sea. Who are you? She asked, voice trembling slightly. My name is Alan. I work with Sophia, he said, his tone heavy. She trusted me. Before she vanished, she left this photo with me. She said if anything happened to her, you might be the only one who could help. Lila's knees felt weak, and Marcus immediately placed a steady hand on her back. Sophia disappeared a decade ago, she said, struggling to keep her voice even. There was no trace, no clues, not even a police report that led anywhere. I know, Alan said, because she wasn't just missing. She was hidden, and the people who took her haven't stopped watching. Marcus turned toward Lila, concern shadowing his features. You never told me any of this. Lila swallowed hard. I didn't think it mattered anymore. I didn't think anyone even remembered. Alan looked at her solemnly. They remember, and they're closer than you think. The silence that followed was suffocating. Marcus signaled to his team to bring Alan aboard, slowly, cautiously. As the stranger stepped onto the deck, Lila felt her world tilt. Everything she thought she had left behind was now surging to the surface. Inside the yacht's main salon, Alan laid out more photos. Grainy surveillance stills, pages from old journals, a map with pins, all connecting a hidden network she had never seen before. And at the center of it, Sophia's name, and hers. I don't understand, Lila said. Why now? Why come after all this time? Because, Alan said, leaning in, Sophia never stopped trying to expose them. Even while she was in hiding. And now that she's gone, they think you might be the next one to speak, or the next one to disappear. Marcus stared at the photos, absorbing every detail. What kind of group are we talking about? Alan hesitated. A syndicate, private investors, old families, people with deep ties across Europe. It started with black market art, then information, then manipulation of entire governments. Sophia got too close, and now they think you might have something she left behind. Lila's mind raced. Her hand went instinctively to her pendant, an old necklace Sophia had given her as a birthday gift years ago. One she never took off, one she'd forgotten even had a secret compartment. Was that what they wanted? As the night deepened and the waves rocked gently beneath them, the three sat with questions hanging heavy in the air. Subplots of lies, history, and lost connections wrapped around them. Who had betrayed Sophia? Was someone inside Marcus's company involved? Had they been watching Lila all along? One of Marcus's security officers stepped in quietly. Sir, we intercepted a signal. Someone ashore at the resort was tracking the yacht's location. Encrypted transmission, but not government grade, possibly private intelligence. Marcus's jaw tightened. So this wasn't random. They knew where we were. Alan nodded. They always do. Suddenly, the glamour of the yacht, the wealth, the luxury, it all felt like a cage. Lila looked around, not with admiration now, but with wariness. How many eyes were watching? How far did the reach of these people go? The story she had stumbled into was bigger than her, but now it was also about her. Marcus leaned toward her. Whatever this is, we face it together. But as he said that, a subtle vibration hummed through the floor of the yacht. Not from the engines, from something else. An alert on Marcus's phone flashed red. Proximity breach. Underwater. And just like that, the lights flickered. Lila stood frozen. What was coming next was closer than ever, and it had only just begun. The soft flicker of the lights snapped everyone into high alert. Lila's heart thudded in her chest as the vibrations beneath her feet grew stronger, subtle but unmistakable. The sound was faint, a low mechanical hum coming from the water below. Marcus's security detail rushed to the control room, voices hushed but urgent. Alan didn't move. His eyes were locked on the floor like he already knew what this meant. "They're here," he said quietly. "This is how they do it. Quiet, precise, no warnings." Marcus checked the encrypted feed on his tablet, his fingers flying across the screen. "There's an object moving under us. It's not a sub, at least not one we've seen before. Small, fast. It could be a drone or a mine." Lila's breath caught. "A mine? You mean like—" "Yes," Marcus said grimly. "Exactly like that." One of the crew members burst into the salon. "We've initiated countermeasures, but if they're this close, they've already mapped our defenses. This wasn't just a random appearance. They were waiting." Lila looked at Alan. "You said Sophia was trying to expose them? That she had information. But what if they think I have it now? What if they're trying to make sure I never find it?" Alan didn't answer right away. His expression had shifted from calm to something darker. Fear, maybe, or guilt. "I think they already believe you know more than you do," he said. "They're afraid. That's why they're rushing. They never make noise unless they feel cornered." The tension was unbearable. Every second stretched out like a wire pulled tight. Lila clutched her pendant without thinking, her fingers brushing over the small latch she'd never paid attention to before. A faint click sounded. Marcus turned to look. "What was that?" Lila slowly opened the locket, and her heart nearly stopped. Inside wasn't just a hidden compartment. There was a microchip, small, nearly invisible, embedded behind the tiny hinge. It was so carefully concealed that she never even knew it existed. Alan's eyes widened. "That's it." Marcus moved to her side instantly. "Don't touch it again. We don't know what's on it yet." Alan leaned forward. "That chip is the reason Sophia went into hiding. It contains names, locations, offshore accounts, everything they have kept buried for years. She didn't trust anyone, not even me. She must have given it to you without ever telling you the truth." Lila's hands trembled. "But I don't know what to do with it." "You don't have to," Marcus said firmly. "We'll secure it. Get it out of here and into safe hands." Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed through the yacht. It was distant, but unmistakable. Something had struck the hull. Not a full blast, but a warning. A signal. They weren't just watching now. They were ready to act. "Everyone below deck now!" Marcus shouted. The crew scrambled, escorting Lila and Alan through narrow passageways into a fortified room below deck lined with reinforced steel. Lila looked around the space. It was built for emergencies, with satellite communications, oxygen tanks, and surveillance monitors lining the walls. But it felt less like a haven and more like a trap now. "We're surrounded," a crew member muttered. "Surface scans show at least 2 watercraft approaching, possibly disguised as civilian fishing boats, but their heat signatures say otherwise." Alan looked at Marcus. "They're not going to wait much longer." Marcus nodded, jaw clenched. "Then we don't either." Lila sat down slowly, gripping the pendant tightly. "They're doing all this just for what's on this chip." Alan turned to her. "It's not just the information. It's what that information could mean. One of the names on that list, someone close to them, was about to turn, leak everything. But Sophia got the data first, and now you have it." Marcus's voice was low and steady. "Who's the leak?" Alan looked hesitant, then finally said, "A man named Castor Moretti. a billionaire investor with deep ties in South America and Europe. He was one of them, but he changed sides, disappeared a month after Sophia. We think he was trying to find her, maybe even you. Lila's head was spinning. So he might still be out there? Alan shrugged, if they didn't get to him first. Another jolt shook the yacht. Lights dimmed, flickered, and went red. The emergency protocol had engaged. From the monitor, they could see shapes swarming the water. Tiny, dark, fast, not boats. Drones, each one armed. Marcus leaned over the table, punching in a code. We've got 10 minutes max before they breach. We either leave now or fight them from within. But where would we go? Lila asked, her voice shaking. We're in the middle of the ocean. Alan gave a slight nod toward the far wall. This yacht isn't just for show. Marcus planned for every possibility, right? Marcus didn't respond, but he moved quickly to a hidden panel. With a hiss of hydraulics, a secondary room opened, revealing a smaller, high-speed escape vessel. Sleek, armed, silent. We get the chip to safety, he said. We send a transmission to Moretti's last known contact. If he's alive, he'll come. Lila looked at the dark water outside the porthole. And if he doesn't? Marcus locked eyes with her. Then we make sure this chip gets to someone who can expose them, even if it costs us everything. Alan stepped into the smaller craft, starting the engine. We need to go, now. But just as they were about to move, the yacht's main alarm blared. Long and deafening. They're boarding, someone yelled from the radio. The countdown had started. Lila turned toward Marcus, her heart hammering in her chest. This wasn't just about some chip anymore. It was about power, secrets, lives, and they were right in the center of it. As the escape vessel lowered into the water, the night around them lit up. Drones circling, shadows darting across the deck above, and the unmistakable sound of voices over loudspeakers. No one knew how it would end, but the next few minutes would change everything. The ocean roared louder than ever as the escape vessel sliced into the water, leaving the massive yacht behind like a fading shadow. The flashing red alarms still echoed in Lila's ears, each blare a reminder that they were being hunted. The sky was dark, dotted with only a few stars, but the real danger didn't come from above. It came from the sea and the silence that followed. Lila held tightly onto the locket, her heart pounding with each crash of the waves. Marcus was steering the boat with fierce focus, his jaw clenched, while Alan was scanning the radar, watching the dots blink across the screen like a deadly countdown. Then something shifted. A new blip appeared, large, fast, and not marked on any satellite data. Marcus narrowed his eyes. That's not one of ours. Alan tapped the screen. It's too fast for a yacht. That's a military-grade vessel. But no flag, no ID. It's cloaked. Lila leaned forward. What does that mean? It means someone else just entered the game, Marcus muttered. Alan looked even more worried than before. This isn't them. This is someone else entirely. Lila's mind raced. Then who is it? Marcus didn't answer right away. He slowed the boat just enough to coast on the current, hoping to blend into the darkness. The approaching ship, still distant but gaining speed, was cutting across the ocean in a straight line, right toward them. Lila thought she'd reached the edge of fear, but the tension kept climbing. What had started as a twisted retaliation for being kicked out of a luxury resort had now evolved into something far more dangerous. Something international, political, even fatal. Alan broke the silence. Do you remember Sophia mentioning a name? Tariq El-Hashim? Lila frowned, thinking hard. Maybe once. I didn't understand who he was. Alan looked grave. He's a fixer. Not on any government list because he doesn't officially exist. But Sophia told me he had access to a global surveillance network operated out of private satellites. He worked for the highest bidder, and the people chasing us now, they burned him. Marcus grunted. And now he's looking for revenge. Or leverage, Alan said grimly. He'd be the only one with the power to intercept those drones, maybe even override them. If he's picked up our signal, he might want the chip for himself. Lila's chest tightened. So now we have two enemies? Marcus looked at her. No, Now we have one enemy and one unknown. The unknown was always worse. The water around them began to ripple strangely from below, as if something massive was beneath the surface. Lila gripped the side of the boat, peering into the black water. A moment later, a mechanical clicking sound echoed from beneath, followed by a burst of bubbles that rose quickly and vanished. Alan stared at the sonar. "That's not a drone." A deep mechanical whir followed, and then a platform slowly emerged from the water, rising like a sea monster from the depths, sleek, metallic, and marked with a strange symbol that none of them recognized. Before anyone could move, a sharp beam of light shot out from the emerging platform and locked onto their vessel. A voice, modulated and cold, came through the hidden speakers around them. "Do not run. You are being offered protection. The locket will be taken into custody." Marcus didn't wait. He shut off the boat's motor, holding a finger to his lips. Lila's hands trembled as she gripped the pendant. "What do we do?" Alan's face darkened. "We stall. We don't know who they are. They didn't shoot, which means they need something. That gives us a window." The platform's light scanned them again, slower this time. A second voice came on, calm, female, and familiar. "Lila, don't be afraid. It's me." Lila froze. "Sophia?" she whispered. Marcus's head snapped toward her. "That's impossible." But the voice continued, gentler now. "If you're hearing this, it means the contingency activated. I didn't want it to be this way, but I left a biometric trigger on the chip. You found it, and they were coming. I'm sorry I couldn't be there in person, but you have to trust the man on board." "What man?" Alan asked. But before the words were fully out of his mouth, a hatch opened on the platform, and a single figure stepped onto the deck. The man was tall, sharply dressed in dark tactical gear, and wore a discreet headset. He raised his hands to show he was unarmed. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, voice steady. "I'm Castor Moretti." The name hit like a thunderclap. Lila's thoughts swirled. This was the man they thought was dead, the man who had once been one of them, before disappearing with their secrets. Alan was the first to speak. "You were working with Sophia." Moretti nodded. "She trusted me because I left that world behind. I helped her build a failsafe, and you're holding it now." Lila glanced at Marcus, who was still skeptical. "Why now? Why show up just as we're cornered?" "Because you're running out of time," Moretti replied. "The group tracking you won't stop, and this platform isn't safe for long. But there's a location Sophia encoded into the chip. It's where the original files are stored, raw footage, documents, the full chain of corruption." Lila's voice was tight. "Where is it?" He hesitated. "Geneva, but we can't just fly in. The location is buried beneath a diplomatic facility. We'll need to go in under the radar, literally." Marcus stared hard at Moretti. "If we go with you, what guarantees do we have that this isn't another trap?" Moretti met his gaze. "None, but you've already seen what they're willing to do. If you stay out here, you won't survive the night." It was the most honest answer he could have given. Lila's fingers curled around the locket, the cold metal pressing against her skin. The weight of it was heavier than ever now, because it wasn't just a key to exposing the powerful. It was a target, a curse, and maybe their only hope. "We go," she said quietly. Marcus hesitated, then gave a short nod. Alan looked unsure, but he followed. As they stepped onto the platform, the night closed in around them. The strange vessel began its descent once again, submerging them into silence. Above the water, the enemy was still circling. But below, a deeper game had begun, one with layers Lila had never imagined. And the most dangerous move was still to come. The air was thin in Geneva, even underground. The tunnels beneath the diplomatic facility were colder than expected, and each footstep echoed like a whisper of danger. Lila's heart pounded with every step, not from fear, but from the heavy promise of what was about to unfold. The locket around her neck pulsed faintly, synced now to a tiny beacon Marcus had activated through Moretti's device. They were so close. The answers they'd been hunted for, the truth behind Sophia's death, and the source of the global surveillance that had nearly cost them everything, it was all hidden somewhere behind these stone walls. Alan wiped sweat from his brow as he cracked open the last digital lock. his hand steady despite the high stakes. "This is it," he muttered. "Room 19A, the vault." Moretti gave a tight nod, his hand hovering near the weapon strapped to his side. No turning back now. Inside the room, rows of hard drives were stored like ancient relics, shelves lined with locked cases, some of them decades old. But it was the pedestal in the center that caught Lila's eye, a small console with a biometric scanner. She stepped forward, the locket glowing faintly. It had always been more than just a keepsake. Now she understood. It was the key. She placed it into the panel. A faint click sounded, then the pedestal rotated, revealing a glass panel beneath it. Inside, a flash drive rested on velvet, simple, unassuming, deadly. Alan picked it up carefully, examining it. This is the source. It has the original Sophia files. Names, bank trails, messages, orders. Everything. Lila barely had time to breathe before the walls vibrated with a low mechanical hum. Moretti turned sharply. "We're not alone." From the darkness behind them, 4 armed figures emerged, silent, fast, and fully armored. Lila froze. These weren't soldiers. These were shadows. The same ones who had chased her in Monaco, who had sabotaged their boat, who had been watching since the beginning. The lead figure stepped forward and removed his mask. Lila's breath caught. It was Armand, not dead, not even hiding, alive, and clearly not who he claimed to be. "You never asked enough questions," Armand said coldly, his eyes gleaming. "Why Sophia trusted me, why I stayed so close to you, even after she was gone." Lila felt her knees weaken. "You were with them?" "I was with her," he said, stepping closer. "Until she turned on the plan, until she decided the world deserved the truth. That's when she became dangerous." Moretti raised his gun, but Armand didn't flinch. "I wouldn't." Alan's fingers inched toward the flash drive, but Armand snapped, "Don't." The standoff was brutal in its silence. Then Lila did something no one expected. She stepped forward, raising her hands, and spoke calmly. "You're right, I didn't ask enough questions. I trusted blindly. But I also listened, and Sophia told me, if I was ever standing where she once stood, I had to choose between safety and truth." Armand laughed bitterly. "She always was dramatic." Lila nodded, "Maybe, but she was also smart." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a second drive, nearly identical to the first. Armand's eyes narrowed. "What is that?" "A backup," she said, holding it up. "But not of the data, of the trace. You've been pinged. This whole vault has." The moment I activated the scanner, the coordinates were uploaded to 6 press outlets. Armand lunged. Gunfire erupted. The world tilted. Moretti tackled Lila to the floor just as a bullet ricocheted off the panel behind her. Alan dove for cover, shielding the original drive with his body. Chaos unfolded in flashes, light, metal, screams. Armand's men were quick, but not quick enough. One by one they fell. Moretti, bleeding from the shoulder, kicked Armand's weapon across the floor. Lila stood, grabbing it mid-slide, pointing it at the man she once thought was a friend. "Why?" she demanded, voice shaking. Armand, still breathing hard, looked up at her. "Because truth doesn't protect the world. It tears it apart." Lila didn't respond. She didn't need to. She turned and handed the gun to Marcus, who cuffed Armand's hands behind his back. The fight was over, but the war wasn't. Alan pulled himself to his feet, cradling the drive. "So, we get this out, we go public, all of it." Moretti wiped the blood from his face. "I know someone, a safe line, no interception. Once it's out, there's no taking it back." Lila nodded slowly, the weight of it all pressing down on her shoulders. She had started this journey as a simple woman, one who was laughed at and thrown out of a resort for not fitting into a world of wealth and status. But now she stood in the heart of a global conspiracy, holding the truth in her hands. They left the vault, the sun rising behind them, casting gold over the snowy peaks of the Alps. A new day, a new chapter. But just as they reached the extraction vehicle, Alan's satellite phone buzzed. He frowned and held it up. "It's from Sophia's old number." Everyone froze. He answered. The voice was soft, familiar. "You did well," it said. Alan's eyes widened. "Sophia." The call disconnected. Lila felt a chill run through her veins. Was she alive? Or had someone else taken her place? The question hung in the air like mist, and as the team disappeared into the dawn, one thing was clear. The story wasn't over. Not yet. The mountains had never felt so still. As the snow softened the sharp edges of the world around them, Lila sat quietly in the back of the black SUV, watching the white landscape blur past. Her fingers still trembled slightly, not from fear anymore, but from everything she had held inside. The flash drive was safe, tucked in Alan's jacket, guarded like the last breath of someone you couldn't afford to lose. Armand had been taken into custody by Swiss authorities, and while there were still loose ends to untangle, the threat was no longer an invisible shadow stalking them through every corner of the world. Lila leaned her head against the window, her thoughts drifting back to Sophia. That phone call, that voice, could it really have been her? A glitch in the system? A planned message set to trigger? Or had Sophia somehow managed to survive? The mystery tugged at her, but she chose not to chase it for now. Sometimes not every question needed an answer to move forward. They reached Geneva's private airstrip just before dusk. The plane waiting on the tarmac wasn't flashy, no logos, no markers, but it was secure. Inside, Moretti reviewed their plan again. We'll land in Reykjavik first, then reroute the footage and files to 3 major global outlets, leaks through independent journalists we can trust. No government hands, no corporate filters. Alan nodded. Once it's out, every digital thread connected to the surveillance network, the financial fraud, and Sophia's recordings will become public. People will know what's been happening. The pressure will hit it all at once. And what happens after that? Lila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Moretti met her eyes. That depends on the world. Lila looked down at her hands. Just weeks ago, she'd been standing outside a luxury resort, humiliated and alone, dismissed because she didn't look the part of someone important. Now she was helping reshape the truth behind the scenes of global corruption. But strangely, the real change had happened inside her, not outside. The plane lifted off quietly, and with it, a weight seemed to ease off her chest. She closed her eyes for a moment, just letting the calm wash over her. By the time they landed in Iceland, the files had already begun uploading. Moretti had coordinated a timed release. Press agencies in Berlin, Tokyo, and Toronto would each receive encrypted packets, followed by a full public data drop. Within hours, hashtags started trending. Names were exposed, accounts frozen, emergency meetings convened in the highest places of power. It was no longer just their fight. People were listening now. The next few days blurred together. Lila stayed in a small cabin near a cliffside overlooking the ocean. It was peaceful. Alan stayed close, working through the last lines of code to ensure no digital fingerprints could be traced back to them. Moretti, ever the ghost, came and went without warning, feeding new intel and reading news updates from a growing list of whistleblowers coming forward. But Lila finally had time to breathe. One evening, as the sky turned a soft lavender, she walked out to the edge of the bluff, wrapping her coat tighter. The waves below crashed against the rocks with a steady rhythm. She took out the old locket again and opened it slowly. Inside, tucked behind the photo, was a tiny chip she hadn't noticed before. Her fingers hesitated. Then she slipped it into Alan's spare tablet. The screen lit up. A message appeared. If you're reading this, I'm probably gone. But maybe not forever. Lila blinked, her heart pounding. You were the only one I trusted with the truth. Not because you had to fight, but because you knew what it felt like to be unseen. That's why you were the only one who could finish this. I staged my death because I had to. There was no other way to stay ahead. I couldn't risk them getting to you too. But I'm watching, quietly, from the edge of the world. Thank you for not giving up on me. Lila smiled, tears brimming in her eyes. She whispered to the screen, you always were 2 steps ahead. Later that night, she shared the message with Alan and Moretti. They both sat in the stunned silence, absorbing it slowly. Moretti shook his head and chuckled. If she's alive, I guess that makes her the greatest ghost of our time. Alan turned to Lila. What now? Lila looked out the window again, her voice steady. Now we let the world speak, and then we start again. Better, smarter. The headlines didn't stop for weeks. Government hearings erupted. Massive protests rose across cities. Powerful figures were ousted from positions they'd held for decades. And through it all, anonymous sources praised a mysterious team who had brought the truth to light, but their names were never mentioned, just the story. Months passed. Lila eventually returned to the very resort she was once kicked out of. Not for revenge, not to make a scene, but to look it in the eye and know it no longer had power over her. She walked past the same marble lobby, the same manager now replaced, and took a deep breath. She was no longer the woman waiting for someone to rescue her. No longer just a billionaire's wife. She had found her voice, her strength, her purpose. That night, standing on the deck of the yacht that once arrived like a thunderclap of justice, she watched the horizon quietly. The wind teased her hair. The stars blinked above. Behind her, Alan approached and stood beside her. "You ever wonder what comes next?" "All the time," she said. "And?" She smiled softly. "Whatever it is, I'm not afraid anymore." The sea stretched out in front of them, endless and wide. The secrets of the world were finally in the light, and though not all of them could be solved, at least the silence had been broken. In the end, it wasn't about yachts or resorts or revenge. It was about truth, and choosing to fight for it, even when no one else would. The waves rolled on, the stars kept shining, and somewhere far away, a woman named Sophia watched the ripples of a story that had only just begun to change the world.